Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim. Certainly Allah's deen is Islam. 3. 19. What is Islam? Translation of Islam Kya Hai? What did Allah say? The Quranic perspective. Ghulam Ahmed Parwez 1964. Talui Islam Trust. Registered. 25B, Gulberg 2, Lahore. 2. Human personality. In the previous chapter it has been noted that 1. Man is not defined by his physical body alone. Other than the body there is another thing within him which is called the human self. 2. We can determine nothing about the nature and reality of the self, regardless of whether it is the self of Allah or the self of man. We can assess it through its attributes and actions. In this chapter, the traits, attributes and deeds of the human self will be discussed. The experts of human biology tell us that the human body is composed of countless cells. But these cells are not such that, once they have somehow or other come into existence, they will remain and continue to exist in the same shape and form as long as man is alive. They state that in every moment there is change and alteration occurring in these cells. This is termed metabolism. Innumerable cells are wasted. This is termed catabolism. And in their place innumerable new cells are formed. This productive process is termed anabolism. 2.1 Change in the human body every moment. The consequence of this continuous metabolism is that, after some time, the human body, which is composed of these cells, transforms into a new body, and nothing remains in this new body from the previous one. According to earlier research, the previous body converted into the new body in 7 years. Now, it is professed that this transformation occurs in 3 years. In any case, whether this change happens in 3 years or 7 years, there is no contradiction in their research that, after a period of some time, the previous body of man changes into a new body. Now consider that, if man is defined by his physical body alone, then after 3 or 7 years the previous individual will come to an end, and a new individual will take his place. What effect this will have in the practical world can be illustrated through an example. 10 years ago, Zaid borrowed some money from you and gave you a written receipt. Now he refuses to return the loan. You present his receipt in the court. In his defense, he presents evidence from a doctor that the Zaid who had written this receipt 10 years previously, does not have a single cell remaining in his body of that Zaid. That Zaid disappeared a long time ago. Now in his place a new Zaid has appeared. If the money is recovered from this present Zaid, then it means that a loan is taken by one person while it is paid by another. And if, due to non-recovery of this loan, he is given some punishment, then it will mean that a crime is committed by one, and punishment is handed out to another. This will be a gross injustice. Now contemplate that, if this doctrine that man is only defined by his body is accepted as being true, then what will be the consequences in the practical world? No pact or agreement will endure, or commitment or word, nor can anyone be forced to follow the law and regulation, or be held accountable or responsible. Nor will it be possible to mete out punishment to anyone for a crime or hold him responsible for a crime. So much so that, if after 10 years a wife says to her husband that the woman with whom you entered into a marriage contract is finished, and I am not bound by that contract, then, according to the above stated doctrine, she will have a right to declare this. In light of this reality, Brightman says, if a person is not a true identical unity through all the changes in his experience, then spiritual development is impossible. Moral growth, for example, rests on the postulate that I am responsible to myself for the past purposes and contracts. Yet if I am not the one who entertained those purposes and made those contracts, I experience neither responsibility nor continuous growth. Irrespective of these external examples, look at your own self and you will understand this matter. If your present age is 40 years, then According to the above doctrine, you will have changed at least 5 or 6 times and have become a brand new individual. But contrary to this, the truth is that, even today, the memory of the event which affected you at the age of 10 years, produces the same happy or sad state of feelings which you had felt at that time. Regarding the feelings which you experienced at that point, you cannot imagine even for a moment that the individual who felt those emotions at that time was not me, but another person. 2.2 Continuation of the self. Who among us will say that those indulgences and gratifications, those frustrations and regrets, whose memory often visits us in the quiet of night shortly before sleep, intermixed with feelings of sorrow and pleasure which produce a spectrum of the rainbow on the horizon of the heart, the tearful splashes of color they continually create, that those were not mine but belonged to someone else, because having transformed due to the disappearance of the cells of my body, and due to metabolism, I have ceased to exist a long while back. Our own experiences, our own feelings are living evidence to this fact that I is not the name of this body which becomes renewed every 3 or 7 years. I is the name of that established reality which always remains changeless despite the metabolism of the body. In the turbulent ocean of change, this radiant luminous pearl which is unfamiliar to change, is called the human self. Berdiev has rightly observed that, personality is changelessness in change. This I, or human self, is that which is responsible for all the deeds of an individual and is affected by their results and outcomes. 2.3 The self and memory. It can be said that the matters which we have discussed above are the magic of human memory, and it has nothing to do with the self. If an individual loses his memory, then he neither remembers any events of his previous life nor does the mention of any event have any effect on him. When memory is restored, then the events of the past start having an effect in the same way. Therefore, this is all a game of memory. But this idea is the outcome of superficial thinking, and is not based on truth. To carry out its decisions, the human self uses the parts of the body as its tools. You decide to grasp something. Your hand moves forward and holds this thing. If, Allah forbid, your hand is paralyzed, then it will not move forward to grasp this thing. Due to the inability of your hand to move, will you reach this conclusion that there is nothing inside you which can make an intent? This was all based on the hand. When the hand became unable to function, then the whole matter ended. You will never say this. That thing which makes a decision or intent still resides inside you. The difference is only that now its intent cannot manifest itself in a visible form in front of you because the hand which was to demonstrate that intent has become devoid of feeling and movement. Now let us move forward from this example. All of man's deeds, whether these are desires of his heart or tangible actions, leave imprints on his self. The human self manifests these imprints through its brain. This is called memory. If the brain becomes damaged due to some disease or accident, then it loses the ability to manifest these imprints on the human self. When it recovers, then the same characteristics are restored in it. This can also be understood through an illustration. On a radio station, some singer, from the fire of his soul, is spreading the flame of his voice and creating a melodious effect through the turbulent ocean of the air. Your radio set is receiving these radio waves, and in this way the same voice is reproduced. You are in the throes of enjoyment of this music when suddenly the fuse of the radio blows. That voice disappears. The singer is still singing at the radio station. Radio waves are still present in your room, but you are not aware of them because the instrument which was the medium for converting these waves into sound has stopped working. The sound of the voice is still there, but its means to manifest itself is no longer there. The brain is the radio set and the human self is the singer broadcasting from the radio station. The failure of the radio set does not mean that there is no longer a singer at the radio station, he is still present. The means to listen to his voice has malfunctioned. Or, for example, you see your reflection in a mirror. The mirror falls and is shattered into pieces, and now you do not see your reflection on the wall. This does not mean you no longer exist, you are still there, but the means through which your reflection was displayed does not exist anymore. The brain is therefore not the actual self, it is that screen on which the self manifests its imprints. Bergson has written an excellent book on this subject which is called Matter and Memory. After discussing this point that memory is not the product of solid matter, rather it is the manifestation of the actions of a human self, he writes. We understand then why a remembrance cannot be the result of a state of the brain. The state of the brain continues the remembrance, it gives it a hold on the present by the materiality which it confers on it, but pure memory is a spiritual manifestation. With memory we are in very truth in the domain of spirit. Dr. Galloway, while discussing immortality in his book, has also debated this point: is memory a function of the brain? As his view has a direct bearing on the question we are considering, it is quoted in full. It may, however, be objected that memory has its basis in neural traces and so cannot survive dissolution of the body. Certainly we are not entitled to say that memory is purely an affair of the mind, for many mental habits appear to be rooted in the structure of the nervous system, and the failure of memory under pathological conditions, or when in old age degeneration of tissue reaches the association areas of the cortex, is positive evidence of some dependence of memory on cerebral traces or processes. The problem turns on the character and degree of this dependence. Now, neural traces are not the sole, nor even the most important condition of remembering. For if so, memory would depend directly on repetition. But this is plainly not the case. The truth is that memory depends far more on the presence of meaning in the things remembered. And meaning must be referred for its maintenance in the mind to psychical, not to cerebral dispositions. It is, therefore, possible that the soul, which includes within it the psychical dispositions formed during this life, may carry with it the means of preserving a continuity between the present order and a higher order of existence. If a world of meanings can be maintained by the soul despite the physiological changes of the body in a lifetime, it is conceivable it might be maintained through a more radical transformation. At all events, a group of memories might remain, sufficient to give the sense of personal continuity. Mental habits are things at an animal level of life. That which is repeated many times becomes a well-established habit, which subsequently is performed mechanically. In fact, this is the exact technique used to train animals by making them repeat an act over and over. This is related to the mechanical action of the brain and not to the mind. Memory is related to that consciousness which is a trait at the level of human life. Therefore, its basis is the human self, not the human body. 2.4 The human self can never be destroyed. Professor Schrödinger has written a short, but very good book titled, What is Life? He ends it with these words, what is this I? Yet each of us has the indisputable impression that the sum total of his own experience and memory forms a unity, quite distinct from that of any other person. He refers to it as I. What is this I? If you analyze it closely you will, I think, find that it is just a little bit more than a collection of single data, experiences and memories, namely the canvas upon which they are collected. And you will, on close introspection, find that what you really mean by I is that ground stuff upon which they are collected. You may come to a distant country, lose sight of all your friends, may all but forget them. You acquire new friends, you share life with them as intensely as you ever did with your old ones. Less and less important will become the fact that, while living your new life, you still recollect the old one. The youth that was I. You may come to speak to him in the third person, indeed the protagonist of the novel you are reading is probably nearer to your heart, certainly more intensely alive and better known to you. Yet there has been no intermediate break, no death. And even if a skilled hypnotist succeeded in blotting out entirely all your earlier reminiscences, you would not find that he had killed you. In no case is there a loss of personal existence to deplore. Nor will there ever be. This is that I. Human self. on which the changes occurring in the human body do not leave any impact. We have seen that when the human hand becomes paralyzed, even then the human self exists, even when the leg becomes paralyzed, or the liver becomes deranged, or the brain becomes damaged i.e. however many parts of the human body become damaged or are finished, the human self does not end. Therefore, even if the whole human body disintegrates, even then nothing can destroy the human self, i.e. even if physical death occurs, his self still remains intact. The shock of death does not cause any change to the human self. It lives even after this, and this is called life after death. As has already been noted in Chapter 1, the purpose of life is the development of the human self, and this is the very responsibility of the Islamic society. If the human self is developed properly, then it becomes worthy of progressive journeying through further evolutionary stages after the demise of the physical human body. Details of this will be covered in later chapters. Uspensky has cited Gurdjieff in support of his view. If a man is changing every minute, if there is nothing in him that can withstand external influences, it means that there is nothing in him that can withstand death. But if he becomes independent of external influences, if there appears in him something that can live by itself, this something may not die. In ordinary circumstances we die every moment. External influences change and we change with them, i.e. many of our is die. If a man develops in himself a permanent I that can survive a change in external conditions, it can survive the death of the physical body. In the words of the philosopher, Iqbal, life is like unto a shell and the self is the pearl drop. Concretion. Therein. What is the shell worth if it cannot transform the pearl drop into a pearl? Through self-knowledge, self-control and self-development, the self can even conquer death. As has been noted in Chapter 1, the divine self is the most accomplished self about which the Quran states. Every moment there is a change in everything in the universe, but it is only the divine self which is free from any change and is possessor of great majesty and honor. 55. 26-27. As the development of the human self keeps taking place, the divine attributes proceed to manifest themselves in it. Within the constraints of human limits, remaining unaffected from external changes is
among the fundamental
attributes of Allah, so such a human being will also remain unaffected from external incidents. 2.5 Life out of death. In ordinary circumstances, our condition is such that, for example, before going to sleep at night, I decided that I will rise at 5 o'clock in the morning. The alarm rang at 5 o'clock and I woke up. But because of the cold outside and the warmth and comfort of my bed, I made the decision that I will forego it today, but will definitely get up early tomorrow morning and go for a walk. The question is that, is the I who made the decision at night prior to going to sleep and the I who went against this decision the next morning, one and the same? Or, for example, I have promised you that I will support you in a certain matter, but right at the last moment, I withdraw my support. The question is, whether the I which made the promise and the I which deserted you, was it the same one? The meaning of these changes in I in this way means that myself is very weak, and has not been developed. The first sign of a developed self is that it does not change its decisions by becoming influenced by external events. Regarding those individuals in whom development of the self begins, i.e. the Jamaat of Mu'minin, the Quran states, in the case of those who say, our sustainer is Allah, and, further, stand straight and steadfast. 41. 30. Allah is our sustainer. And then stand steadfast in this conviction. Throngs of opposition cannot then create the slightest tremor in their resolute stance, on the contrary, this further reinforces their iman. 3. 173. This is the first indication of the development of the human self. Even the cognizance of death cannot produce any kind of transformation in it. The birth of a new I in every moment in an individual. I.e. his constantly changing. Is shirk with his own self, and shirk is the cause of humiliation as a human being. The oneness of Allah also means that his self is changeless. Say. He is Allah, the one and only. 112. 1. 2.6 The Quran is about man. As noted previously, the Quran has explained the divine attributes in detail. Leaving aside those attributes which are specifically for the divine self. E.g. He is the first. The remainder are those whose manifestation can be within the human self. Looking at it from this angle, the explanation of these attributes is the explanation of the essentials and characteristics of the human self itself. This is why it is stated in the Quran. We have revealed for you, O men, a book in which is a message for your eminence. Will you not use your intellect? 21. 10. We have revealed to you such a book that, if you employ your intellect and reasoning, you will see that it is all about your own eminence. These attributes are numerous, but some of these are such that they hold a fundamental status in one respect. These attributes are explained very comprehensively in Surah Al-Ikhlas. Though it consists of only 4 short verses, if we expand these verses in meaning, then all 4 aspects of the universe of the human self converge together before us. The first verse is, Say. He is Allah, the one and only. 112. 1. In other words, the first attribute of a self is its oneness. Oneness is a very comprehensive term which cannot be translated in one word. This contains all the connotations of uniqueness, oneness, and wholeness. The self, first and last, evident and immanent, is only a self. 57. 3. There is nothing in it of even an iota of adulteration by any other thing. We have seen earlier that the state of the underdeveloped self is such that it is one thing at the time of going to sleep and another when waking up next morning. One thing when making a commitment and another when breaking it, one thing in the state of anger and another in the state of stress. This is not a sign of the unity of the self. Tawheed. It is a sign of shirk. Tawheed, oneness, means that the self does not keep changing by being influenced by external events or internal sentiments. It should always remain steadfast in its traits and characteristics. This attribute of the self is called immutable principles or immutable laws. The Quran terms it Sunnatullah. No change will you find in the practice of Allah. Sunnatullah. 33. 62. This attribute of the human self is called character. In the words of Bertiev, the manifestation of the self is through character. Professor Whitehead remarks, truth is the conformation of appearance to reality. The expression of unity in both the outer and inner states of the human self is a sign of its living proof and manifested evidence. 2.7 The law of requital. The natural consequence of the human self is that I, myself, am responsible for all my intentions, decisions, deeds and actions. Therefore, the effects and consequences of these will have to be borne by me alone. No one else can become a partner in this. The foundation of the whole structure of the law of requital of the Quran rests on this basic principle. No bearer of burdens can bear the burden of another. 6. 164. In this respect, no intercession can benefit anyone nor compensation, nor can anyone be the source of atonement or reparation for someone else or provide help or support to another. Then protect yourselves against a day when oneself shall not avail another, nor shall intercession be accepted for him, nor shall compensation be taken from him, nor shall anyone be helped from outside. 2. 48. This is the proclamation concerning the law of requital and, as mentioned above, this is the natural consequence of the individuality of the human self. When my headache cannot be removed by the intercession, atonement, or compensation of another, then how can these things remove the effects of my deeds? My Jannat, paradise,
Jahannam,
hell, will be shaped according to these, and no other person can interfere in this. Details will be covered in later chapters. The second verse of Surah Al-Ikhlas states, Allah, the eternally enduring, absolutely free. 112. 2. Samdat is the second trait of the self. This is also a comprehensive expression which means to be free from dependency on external support, being master of your own intentions and self-sufficient in your own decisions. The Quran states about the divine self, for Allah carries out all that He wills. 22. 18. For Allah does command according to His will and plan. 5. 1. Such verses as these are mirrors of this attribute. It is on the basis of this very trait of the self that man has been made an individual possessing responsibility and intent and given the right to choose from many different possibilities. The Quran states, do whatever you wish. 41. 40. And then in another verse, say, the truth is from your sustainer. Let him who will, believe, and let him who will, reject it. 18. 29. None else in the universe has been given the freedom to choose and make decisions. Since intent and choice are the fundamental traits of the human self, growth and development can thus only take place via those deeds which man carries out willingly using his ability of free choice and intent. Neither good under compulsion is actual good, nor is evil under duress, evil. The Quran has made it clear. There is no compulsion in deen. 2. 256. This is what is meant by this declaration. Man's freedom of choice and intent are respected to such an extent that, never mind anyone else, even Allah, despite His infinite powers, does not interfere in this freedom. This is His own decision on which He remains firm. In the words of the philosopher, Iqbal, God Himself cannot feel, judge and choose for me when more than one course of action are open to me. The humanity of a man is connected to his choice and intent. This is a requirement of the attribute of samdat of the self. It should be made clear that to put restrictions on oneself through one's own choice is not against its own freedom. A constraint on freedom is that which another imposes externally on a self against its will. Allah Himself has imposed these types of constraints on Himself. For example, the Quran states, your sustainer has inscribed for Himself the rule of Ramat and Rabi'ah. 6. 54. Whatever restrictions man puts willingly on his self for its development, these are not against the essence of being human. A Quranic society is a model of this fundamental concept of freedom and constraint in which the self of an individual keeps on developing and continuing to progress forward. The third verse of Surah Al-Ikhlas states, He begetteth not, nor is He begotten. 112. 3. The common translation of this is, He has neither given birth to anyone through procreation nor was He born by procreation through anyone. This is also a fundamental trait of the self. The human body is born through procreation. This birth is at an animal level. In this manner, an individual becomes the offspring of his father and his own children are born in this same way. But the human self is not the consequence of this process of birth. In the process of birth through reproduction and procreation, a part of the father separates and becomes part of the body of his child. But the self is an indivisible entity, it cannot be divided into parts. If a part of the self separates from it, then the self remains incomplete, and the self becoming incomplete is against its fundamental trait. Procreation, i.e., producing children through reproduction, is necessary for the continuation of the human race, but the requirement of the self is not procreation but creation. As has been noted in Chapter 1, it is a trait of a human being that he participates in the creative program of the creator of the universe. Because no other thing in the universe has been endowed with a self. And this is the reason for human eminence. The fourth verse of Surah Al-Ikhlas states, "And there is none like unto him." 112. 4. There is none like him or his equivalent. Compared to that nation in which its people are developing their selves, no other nation in the world will be equivalent to it. When the Quran said about the Jama'ati Mu'minin, you will overcome all. 3. 139. That same truth was being referred to. As has been previously stated, the Quran has presented the divine attributes with great emphasis and detail, and these are referred to at various places in its verses, dispersed like sparkling pearls. The reflection of these attributes in the human self is a sign of the development of the self. In the following chapter, the technique to develop the human self, or how man receives instructions for this self development, will be elucidated. As has been clarified in Chapter 1, the edifice of Deen is raised on the foundation of acceptance of the concept of the human self. From this aspect, the degree to which this concept or belief is significant in the system of Deen is very evident. In the coming chapters, you will come across references to the human self frequently in many places, and details of its various attributes and features will appear before you. But in view of the significance of this concept, we wish at this juncture to briefly summarize various aspects of the human self again, so that wherever it is referred to in the following pages, these facts are kept in view in order that no wrong idea is formed about it at any point. Please attend to these carefully. 1. In relation to living things, the Quran has, in numerous places, referred to the process of creation and its various stages. During this process, that point is reached where the creative act takes place through procreation and reproduction, i.e., the creation of animals, in which the embryo grows in the womb for a specified duration. In this connection, the Quran has first mentioned all the stages which all animal and human embryos go through in the womb, e.g., the fertilized egg transforming into an embryo, the embryo taking shape as a piece of flesh, then the formation of bones within it, then the casing of these bones by a covering of flesh. These are those stages through which both animal and human offspring pass in a similar fashion. After this, the Quran states about the human embryo. Then we created out of it another creature. 23. 14. This means that, having reached this stage, man then became a completely different creature from other animals. At another place, it is proclaimed about this clearly differentiating change. And breathed into him something of his ruh, divine energy. 32. 9. This is that trait due to which man becomes divergent from other animals, and because of which the universal forces, angels, bow before him. In Surah Sad, it is stated, "Behold, your sustainer said to the angels, universal forces, I am about to create man. Beginning creation. From clay. Inanimate matter. When I have fashioned him. In due proportion. And breathed into him of my ruh. Divine energy. Fall you down in obeisance unto him." 38. 71-72. This thing which Allah has called his own energy has been bestowed on man alone, and none other. In this regard, that man is a totally different creation from animals. An expert on evolution of our time, Simpson, has written, "To say that man is nothing but an animal is to deny, by implication, that he has essential attributes other than those of animals. It is important to realize that the essence of his unique nature lies precisely in those characteristics that are not shared with any other animal. His place in nature and its supreme significance to man are not defined by his animality but his humanity. Man has certain basic diagnostic features which set him off most sharply from any other animal and which have involved other developments, not only increasing this sharp distinction but also making it an absolute difference in kind and not only a relative difference of degree. 2. This thing is not intellect either. Since there is detailed discussion in chapter 4 about intellect and deen, there is no need at this point to expand further on this aspect as details will be covered later. 3. Neither is it that entity which psychologists term as the psyche, or which is referred to as the subconscious mind according to psychoanalysis. Nor is it that thing which was called the spirit in ancient philosophy and which was considered to be the opposite of physical matter. The reality is that, according to research in the modern era, the original concept itself of matter which was generally prevalent previously in human philosophical thinking no longer remains. Matter is now no longer something which possesses a solid state. Sir James Jeans terms it as bottled-up waves. Russell calls it interrelated events. Einstein gives it the name of considered thoughts. Ouspensky views it as merely a condition. If we look at it purely from the physical point of view, then a material object consists of smaller particles which are called molecules. If these are further analyzed, they are found to consist of even smaller elements which are called atoms. Proceeding further, these convert into electrons and protons which are called particles of electricity on which the definition of matter does not even fit. In this way, matter, according to ancient belief, becomes non-matter itself. Therefore, the duality of spirit and matter which had confused philosophers of previous generations so much, has now practically disappeared. The Quran does not even mention matter as the opposite of spirit, so much so that there is no mention of the spirit as the soul in the Quran.
Having referred to the beginning of the creation of the material universe in Allah's Allama, universe of Amma, the Quran moves forward because the human mind enclosed in the physical world cannot envisage the truth and reality of the metaphysical world, Allama.
Therefore, the thing which made man eminently different from other creations is not even ruh, meaning it is neither spirit nor soul. 2.8 This al-nafs is the human self. 4. The Quran has declared this entity as different from intellect, consciousness, mind, psyche, spirit, or soul and stated it using the term nafs. In Surah Al-Shams, the Quran declares, by the nafs, self, and the proportion and order given to it, and its enlightenment as to its wrong and its right. Truly he succeeds who purifies it, and he fails who corrupts it. 91. 7-10. Nafs. And all those means and elements which set it right and help it to achieve completion, are a witness to this truth that Allah has kept within it as possibilities both the potential of disintegration and the ability to remain protected from this disintegration. He who developed it, became successful, and he who suppressed it, did not allow it to flourish and blossom, failed, and remained unsuccessful. You will have seen how the Quran declares the human nafs to be a unique, specific, and permanent entity. This is what is called human personality. The latent potentials of both development and disintegration have been kept within it. For scholars and philosophers this fact is not unfamiliar that, when we use the term I in philosophical usage, its meaning is one thing, but when we use this word I in our general daily speech, it means something different. The Quran has also used this word nafs with different meanings. In our daily conversations, the word nafs has also been used for those that we classify as that person or I myself etc., and this word is also used for the specific meaning of the human self. For the student of the Quran, it is important to always keep this difference in mind. 2.9 The human self is not part of the self of Allah. 5. The human nafs is granted by Allah and it is not part of the self of Allah. Allah has called it min ruhi, i.e. divine energy from me, or min ruhina, i.e. divine energy from us. But he, Allah, has never called himself as ruhi, if it was written in the Quran that Allah is Ruh and that He has given a part of it, Ruh, to man, then it could be said that the human self is part of the self of Allah. But the Quran has not said such a thing anywhere, therefore this is not part of the self of Allah. A self cannot be subdivided into parts. The human self is the expression of Allah's Ruh, divine energy. i.e., from it can emerge the divine attributes, though these will only be within the constraints of human limitations and will not be limitless and infinite like Allah. 2.10 Life in the Hereafter. 6. We have seen that Allah has called the human self a new or unique creation. Hence, this is neither the product of physical evolution nor is it governed by the physical laws under which the human body remains alive and functions. This is the reason why, with physical death, the human self does not come to an end, and remains even after this physical death. This is called the life in the hereafter, or life after death. In Surah Bani Israel, it is stated. They say, what? When we are reduced to bones and dust, should we really be raised up to be a new creation? 1749. The objection and question of those who believe in the materialistic concept of life is that, when death occurs with the disintegration of the physical body, will it be possible to get a new life after this? How can it be obtained? In reply to this it is stated. Say. Nay. Be you stones or iron, or created matter which, in your minds, is hardest to be raised up. Yet shall you be raised up. Then will they say, who will cause us to return? Say, He who created you first. Then will they wag their heads towards you, and say, when will that be? Say, maybe it will be quite soon. 1750-51. Say to them, yes. You will certainly get life after death. Even if, with the passage of time, your material constituents convert into stones or turn into iron or any other creation about which you consider that life cannot emerge from it. At this they will retort, who will bring us back to life? Say to them, that same Allah who brought you into life from nothing the first time. That same Allah who can create existence from non-existence, can make life continue even after the death of the body. At this time, the vehicle of life will be the human nafs. Self. In this way, the stream of life will flow forward after the physical life. If the human nafs was under the control of physical laws like the human body, then with the death of the body, this too would have ended. But, because this is not dependent on the support of the body for its existence, it therefore does not die with the demise of the body. 2.11 The Immortal Life. 7. One is survival after death, and the other is immortality. Survival after death is for every conscious human being, but immortality can only belong to that self which has been developed accordingly. This is called tajka nafs. It should be made clear that completion of the development of the human self does not happen in this world alone. For this it will have to pass through further stages in the life of paradise in the hereafter. In this world, the development process commences, and if this reaches a certain level, which the Quran has called tilting the balance with righteous deeds, then it becomes enabled to progress through the next stages. 101. 6-7. If this does not happen, then its development halts. This is called the life of hell. 8. Regarding the life of paradise of the human self in the hereafter, we have stated that it will achieve immortal life. This means that after physical death in the worldly life it will not endure another death. The Quran states, nor will they there taste death, except the first death. 44. 56. In this, apart from the first death, the flavor of which they have already tasted, these people will not taste death. They will journey through further evolutionary stages of life, but this immortal life is not like the abdat of Allah. None can get that kind of azal at beginning, or abdat Immortality. Like him. Regarding these people, it has been stated in numerous places in the Quran, they will stay in paradise forever, but regarding this abd, it is stated in another verse. They will dwell therein for all the time that the heavens and the earth endure, except as your sustainer wills. A gift without break. 11. 108. They will stay in it during the time that the heavens and the earth remain, except as is in the will of Allah. The last part is taken to mean that the will of Allah is that it should be like this. That is, the existence of the inhabitants of paradise will be till such a time that the heavens and earth remain in place according to the will of Allah. At the present level of our consciousness, we cannot comprehend how long the duration of this state will be. However, this is clear that this abd of the developed human self is definitely not like the abd of Allah. This is our meaning of immortal life. 9. The purpose of human life is to develop the human self. The Quran has given that code according to which development of the human self takes place. Therefore, according to the Quran, the purpose of ethics is not only that a society can be established so that a life of prosperity and peace is lived, from this the purpose is that by living life according to these values, development of the human self takes place. Hence, a righteous deed is that due to which the human self develops, and an evil deed is that due to which development of the human self halts. This is that very standard for righteousness and evil, right and wrong, of a nation or society. In the nation or society in which the self of individuals develops, that is in accordance with haqq, the Quranic values. In the one in which the development of the human self stops, that is batil, evil. This is what is called freedom and slavery. Those individuals whose self is developed, are free. Those whose development has halted, are enslaved and subjugated, even if they have their own government. From this you will have seen how the structure of both the political system and the society is also based on the concept of the human self, and how the system of ethics revolves around this very focus. 2.12 The human self develops by giving. 10. Just as there are laws established for the growth of the human body, similarly there are laws defined for the development of the human self. These laws are called the permanent values, details of which will be covered in a separate chapter. At this stage, it will be enough to make a reference to a central point. The human body grows as a result of those things which a person himself eats or utilizes. Contrary to this, the human self develops with all those things which this person gives for the development of others. In other words, the body grows by taking, whereas the self grows by giving. Those who spend their wealth for increase in self-purification. 92. 18. That individual who gives away everything in his possession, which is beyond his needs, see verse 2. 219. To fulfill the needs of others so that his self can develop, and whose self becomes developed, achieves the purpose of life. Details will be given in the next chapter. But those will prosper who purify themselves. 87. 14. 2.13 Basis of the Islamic economic system. The Quranic system of sustenance is established on this same basis. If you reflect on the history of mankind, then this truth will become apparent, that the question which has kept man in a disturbed and perturbed state is a. Different people have differing abilities to work and earn. b. The result of this is that the one who earns more gains wealth beyond his needs. c. The one who has a lesser ability to earn does not earn enough to meet his needs. d. In order to maintain a balance within society, and to provide sustenance to the people, it is essential that those who have surplus money spend their wealth on those whose needs are unmet. e. The question is, why should those who have surplus money give their wealth to others? The solution presented by ethics is that the sentiments of the wealthy should be appealed to on the basis of compassion for humanity, so that they give their wealth in charity. But experience tells us that these appeals are very rarely successful, Therefore even this cannot be a satisfactory solution to this question. In addition, the self of human beings who are nourished through charity is harmed and they develop an inferiority complex. From this point of view also, this proposal cannot be viewed as correct. The governments of the world impose taxes for this, and in this way acquire spare wealth from the rich. The wealthy regard this as forcible acquisition and so utilize such techniques through which they can escape the government's grip. As a consequence, the malady of dishonesty becomes commonplace in society. If they fail in these efforts of theirs, then they will just stop trying to earn more. They say, why should we work so hard day and night to produce such wealth which we cannot keep? Why should we not earn only that much which can remain with us? This affects the productivity of society very badly. This is the difficulty in which today's communist system is badly ensnared, i.e. there is no incentive within it due to which people work to their fullest ability to increase the wealth of the nation, and then retain only that which meets their needs, and hand over the rest to the government. 2.14 The solution to this problem. This incentive can only be found from the Quran, which says that the self of that individual who earns to whatever great an extent he can, and then donates his surplus wealth for the nourishment of others, will develop proportionally. According to this doctrine, every individual works to his fullest capability but does not keep surplus wealth. From this, on the one hand, the root of the capitalist system is severed. Since the very foundation of the system is based on surplus capital. And on the other hand, a satisfactory solution becomes available for this difficult issue due to which the communist system has to use the whip of force and is now failing badly. Details of these are given later. From the above discussion, the fundamental traits of the human self have been presented before you. And it has also become evident how the structures of the Islamic economic, social, ethical, and political system are raised on such a foundation. In the following chapters the details of these will appear before you.